The GOP tax plan has been winding its way through Congress today. It appears that President Trump is turning his attention to another campaign trail promise: infrastructure investment. Yesterday, 3 people died and more than 100 others were hurt when an Amtrak passenger train jumped the tracks outside of Tacoma, Washington, and landed on the highway below. Investigators say the train had been going about 50 miles an hour over the speed limit on the very first trip of a new service from Seattle to Portland, Oregon. President Trump offered his condolences for the victims and their families, but only after he tweeted this: "The accident, quote, shows more than ever why our soon-to-be-submitted infrastructure plan must be approved quickly. $7 trillion spent in the Middle East while our roads, bridges, tunnels, railways, and more crumble, not for long." In fact, those Washington train tracks were funded by a recent infrastructure investment program. And while the president has yet to detail exactly where $1 trillion in funds for his plan would come from or where they would go, federal funding for Amtrak developments like this one would actually be cut if President Trump has his way. In the White House's 2018 budget proposal, Obama-era transportation funding would be cut by 13%, and subsidies for long-distance Amtrak routes would drop by $630 million. So what is the state of Trump's infrastructure plan, and what can be done to prevent accidents like these in the future? I'm joined now by Rosabeth Moss Kantor, a Harvard Business School professor and the author of Move: How to Rebuild and Reinvent America's Infrastructure. Rosabeth, thank you for being here.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Can you start by telling me how an accident like this happens on a brand new train line? Because I can't wrap my brain around that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's an awful tragedy, and we have to pause for a moment and just acknowledge how terrible it is. And in fact, our safety, the safety of our highways, it's all jeopardized because we don't spend on infrastructure. So I can only imagine, who, with budget cuts on long-distance rail service with Amtrak, so what did they do to cut down on the training program for whatever engineer was going too fast? What did they do not to have enough trial runs? So all those budget cuts are often taken out of things you don't really see. So that's awful. Then we blame this guy, but it turns out there's some technology that would have slowed the train.
What could have done that? Sorry.
Yeah, positive train control. It's wireless and it's automatic, and it's like pilots. We don't insist that pilots of airplanes do it all themselves. They use technology. We have not modernized all of our technology in modernizing infrastructure, and I haven't seen that in the plans.
And we heard about positive train control a couple years back, right, in connection with another rail accident. Refresh my memory. What was the...
It was a derailment outside of Philadelphia.
Thank you.
And there was positive train control on that train. However, the reason it wasn't activated was because there happened to be a wireless dead spot because we don't have enough broadband in America. So all this stuff goes together to make us increasingly less modern, falling behind,
unsafe,
uncompetitive.
So you spent, more than, or up to 2 years, nearly 2 years, studying our infrastructure in the country, right, for Move. So that includes not just trains and train tracks, which we're talking about, but what else? Highways, bridges,
air, smart roads, the use of technology. I'm pleased to say that while Boston has incredible traffic congestion, we do use technology pretty well. We've been a pioneer on a lot of that. On air, this week also, there was a cascade effect because of all the canceled flights out of Atlanta because of a fire that put power out. There was a power outage. So that also could have been because we weren't investing and keeping things up to date. It's too late when you have potholes all over the place to say now we'll fix them after you have a few accidents.
How much would it cost to get us up to date, as you put it? How many trillions of dollars?
Well, it would probably cost multiple trillions of dollars. I do agree with the plan.
3, 5, 7?
3, 5. There's a civil engineering society that says at least 5, and that's just to get us repaired. But if we start reinventing, and again, here, I love Greater Boston. Here we've got tech savvy. If we let...
Oh, I thought you meant the show when I was all excited.
Yeah, well, okay, I like that too.
You're right. Boston area, very, very technologically advanced.
Yes, well, both. And in fact, we could invent our way out of a lot of this. We could deploy new technology. We could, in fact, invent the future instead of just repairing things to have them look exactly like they did look. Nobody wants to spend on maintenance. You don't see it. Imagine you get your house painted, it looks just like it used to.
Right. You want to see some return on the investment.
Exactly. So we should be creating change, and we're not.
But there are limits to that, right? I mean, you can't reinvent the bridge, for example. We have this terrifying number of bridges. I was reading a piece you did for Harvard Magazine, terrifying number of bridges that are going to be past their safe use date very soon.
Totally true. And in fact, I wrote about all of this in my book, which came out 2.5 years ago. I was on this show then, and nothing has changed. On the bridges, we actually had new technology in Massachusetts, instant bridges. There was an instant bridge program where, because of assembling them off-site, we rolled into place a bridge a weekend over 14 weeks.
I remember that, yeah.
Isn't that cool?
That is cool.
If we use that's new techniques, that's innovation.
So President Trump is talking about $1 trillion in new investment. As I understand this, tell me what I'm missing. $1 trillion in new investment, but with only about $200 million of that coming from the federal government, right? There's talk that he wants states and municipalities to raise new funds on their own, maybe for other funds to come from cuts in certain areas. What do you think of that approach?
So first of all, it's like a bake sale for the cities. I mean, I think it's fantasy. I think just as it was fantasy that somehow the private sector will pay for all of this, privatization only goes so far, and in America has only partially worked. I think that states, where are they going to get the money? Where are the local governments going to get the money? So municipal bonds are a nice source of funds, but interest rates are low. It's a fantasy that you could do this without the federal government. And secondly, a lot of things connect across areas. We're talking about a train derailment that spanned Washington and Oregon, that train, and it was connecting many cities. So who would pay for that?
Right. Yeah, because everyone's got a stake in it. All right, so hypothetically, I think we got about 30 seconds left. Way more than we need for this question. If President Trump came to you and said, Rosabeth, you wrote the book, I want to make our our infrastructure in this country great once again. What are the top 3 priorities I should hit? What would you tell him? Well,
first of all, I would tell him air traffic control, which he said was a top priority, isn't. I think it's roads and bridges, and then I think it's rail. It is definitely rail, because it's a way for people to get around actually relatively safely if we use technology that we have. And in cities, we need transit. People are stuck in traffic, and it's hurting us all. So we need urban transit, and that's not on his list.
All right. Rosabeth Moss Kantor, really appreciate it. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Adam.